Hi, I'm David.
Hi, I'm Yelena.
And this is Connie. And we're going to get, sorry, I was trying to figure out how to tie Connie into the tutorial somehow, but he can't do anything really. We're going to be talking about the dreaded yoga butt. It's an injury to the hamstring attachment right under the sits bone, and ways to avoid it. Oh, lost him. But before we get to that, we want to make sure that you're getting what you need from us. So let us know in the comments section. What do you want to know about? Asanas, Ashtanga yoga, certain postures, how to avoid certain injuries? Let us know. Give the video a like, and most important, subscribe.
So yoga butt is unfortunately common as an injury.
Yeah, it is actually.
It happens a lot, and it most often happens to someone who is already on the flexible side. It happens all across, but often someone that has a lot of mobility in their body but hasn't yet learned how to engage, or is feeling tired and lazy one day in practice and you kind of let go, it's very easy to injure yourself. And the worst part about it is that it takes really long time to heal. I'm speaking from experience. I've had it happen to me a few times. And it takes about 6 months to a year for the injury to go away, only because there's a very little blood supply in that area when it happens, because it happens usually to your tendon.
It's the tendon, yeah.
And so it takes a while to heal. What's important is that you continue practicing, because as you practice and you increase the blood flow and circulation, that actually helps with the healing, but you have to be extra careful and extra mindful to make sure that you don't make it any worse.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about where it is for a second. So we've got 3 hamstrings on each leg, and then the hips, the bottom of the hips, the ischial tuberosities, the sits bones, the hamstrings join in there. And so where a muscle joins to bone, it turns to tendon. And so what happens is that while the muscles have a lot of intelligence and reaction to them, they'll kind of change according to circumstances. The tendon doesn't change as quickly, and so when the stretch goes too much into the tendon, it can't accommodate it, and then it gets these tears in it. And then what happens is it becomes very sensitive. It can even hurt just to sit down, but anytime then that you stretch it, it's going to start to hurt again. So how does it get stretched? Well, anytime you fold forward, then your sits bones are going to lift up, right? Do you see that? How if Yelena is especially holding like a neutral spine, or really more of an anterior tilt, she's more extended in the spine, then the hips are kind of lifting through the bottom, so the ischial tuberosities are coming up as the sacrum drops down, right? So that is going to stretch here, and that's where it'll start to hurt. And actually, Yelena went to this position because this is where it's really common for people to hurt it. So when the legs are together, say you have not tight hamstrings, but the hamstrings, when they get to a certain point, you can feel like the stretch is there, right? What happens there is they will limit you. So you get to a point and the intensity of the stretch will probably stop you from going too deep. But when your legs open, here, like in a pose like in Ashtanga Prasarita Padottanasana, the wide foot forward stretch, then we take the stretch out of the outside hamstrings. Have you ever noticed you can go deeper in a forward fold when your legs are apart? But the medial hamstring, the inside one, is still getting a lot of stretch, and so that's where usually it happens. And so it's combined with that sort of lack of resistance through the hamstrings, and then also a collapse here. through the lower belly. Because look what happens when Yelena drops her belly. She goes into an arch position. Look what happens when she draws in through the lower belly. Can you see how that lifted? And watch again. Can you go into an arch position again? I don't know if you can see. I'll put my finger here on her sits bone. Watch what happens in terms of the sits bone when she goes into that lifted lower belly action here. So the sits bone drops down. What is that doing? Effectively, it's shortening the stretch that's happening here in the tendon. Okay, so that's what, when Yelena was saying, you know, when people are hypermobile or not as contained in the front of the body when they go into those stretches, combined with sort of the deeper reaches of a wide leg forward fold and the extra stretch happening on the medial hamstring, then that's where the injury will happen. And we do this pose standing, Prasarita Padasana, and then also on the floor we have a few postures that are wide leg as well.
So again, it's really important that you pay attention to kind of pulling on the lower belly and coming back to bandhas or to that pelvic floor engagement, because they'll protect the hamstring. For me, I injure mine often by demonstrating, and when we're doing workshops and teaching, when I'm doing these, you know, this is what you shouldn't do, that's when I feel it. And even now, holding it, I can feel the sensation. So what starts to happen is you begin to distinguish between different kind of stretching sensation in your body. So that kind of specific needle-like, almost heat pain that comes from stretching this way isn't what you're looking for in the practice. Don't get used to it. Don't think this is good. You actually want to go the other way. And so when I find that engagement and I pull in, what happens, instead of feeling everything here, the sensation shift right down here, which is kind of a belly of the muscle. So it stays centered there without anything here or even down here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically the way that if it does happen, or let's say to avoid it, then we want to make sure that we're not overloading the hamstrings in any kind of forward bend. And it can be legs together too. It's possible to overdo it there, but more likely legs apart. That's where I've heard of it happening more. And that means that you don't want to go into a spinal extension or hold the spinal extension as you go forward. So what's that? That's this arched position, because like we were saying before, that's going to tilt the posture in an anterior tilt and start to lift the sits bones up. Okay, so when we're doing a forward fold, now it's not that you want to round your spine. You don't want to flex your spine in the forward bend, because that'll, you know, create other problems. But you want to maintain a more controlled neutral position through the spine. And so Yelena is going to really activate through the lower abdominal muscles. Really, she's going to feel the whole lower belly and all around the waist nice and strong here. And you see that's going to keep the back more flat. And then as she goes in deeper into hip flexion, she's going to bring the hips down, but she's not going to be lifting through the sits bones. She's going to be working hard to keep the sits bones pulling down. And that can even feel like activating the hamstring. So keeping the hamstrings like nice and strong instead of passively pushing back through the leg and trying to get them to relax. Okay?
And then as you're coming back up, again, watch the habit of leading with your head. You want to first make sure that the back of your neck is nice and flat, so there isn't too many wrinkles. And then as I lead this way, I'm actually leading from my belly as opposed to leading by lifting the head high up. And so this brings me back into that same position where then the lift happens here, and it takes any of that kind of sensation out.
Yeah. And we'll just go down onto the floor for a second and look at how this could happen on the floor too. So one of the things that we kind of discourage people to do is to come off of the sits bones in a forward bend. And this is for the same reason. Once we start to lift through the sits bones, the potential to overstretch in the tendons is too much. So you don't want to hold an anterior tilt in the hips, or try to, you can't really, going forward, or you put too much force lifting up through the back, through the sits bones. You want to instead feel like you're tucking under, holding the sits bones down, and then extending through the spine. So that maybe you do roll forward a little bit on the sits bones. That's ideal. So you're shifting forward, but you're not pressing back through them. Do you know what I mean? Trying to almost arch your back while you do a forward bend. You can see physically it's impossible anyways. You do have to round the lower back in a forward bend. But attempting to do an anterior tilt in a forward bend is not a super great idea. And the last thing I'll finish with then is when we do a seated version of this pose, Upavishta Konasana, we call it, the one thing that you'll want to look out for is the legs collapsing in. And so this is kind of a sort of a cheap way of getting deeper into the posture, because you're letting your legs roll in. It makes it easier to bring the torso down further, but it's going to make the sits bones light, and you're in that wide leg stretch, so you do need to be very careful. So make sure that your knees and your toes keep pointing up at the ceiling and the legs stay engaged as you come down, and that's going to help you ground through the sits bones. Also, of course, pulling in on the lower belly, same work that you did standing. Okay.
We should add that if you do have an injury, all you have to do, is perhaps keep that knee soft by bending it more. Make sure that you're not going into any kind of sensation. The moment you feel something there, it's a cue for you to perhaps bend the knee more or come out of the pose, out of the forward fold, whatever it is. Just give it time to heal before you start approaching and kind of finding new depths again.
Yeah, it's totally possible to keep practicing, no problem. Just, you got to be careful. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's our talk on yoga butt. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful for you. And if you do have yoga butt, I hope it gets better soon. Give us a like, please subscribe, and let us know what you thought. Bye.
See you soon.